Yes.
Well, it's delightful to welcome you back. It's the Andrew Eborn show here again, and we've got my very special guest, Mick Gurr, on the line. How are we doing, Mick? We had a little bit of a connection issue all the way down there. The hamster wheels have turned, but we've got you back fighting fit, which is glorious. And we started talking about your early days. You were born in November 1940 in the war to an extraordinary family, a very religious family, and we started to talk about those days. Tell me about your childhood.
Really, I had rather a disappointing childhood. I hated going to the meetings 3 times on a Sunday. It was the same format every Sunday, 3 times a day. And I disliked it while other children were out playing. But I had to go to them until I was about 13 years old. Then I just stopped. I refused.
And it was, in fact, the Exclusive Brethren. And for those who might know the name, but we always, what I always like to do on this show is we always question everything. And you hear so many reports in the media about different sects and so on and so forth. It's very helpful when I get guests on to actually tell us from the inside what's it all about. So the general beliefs and the tenets and how people live their life with the Exclusive Brethren, give us an insight into that. What were the main beliefs and how did it dictate people's lives?
Well, the main beliefs were that you didn't mix with other people. Everything I wanted to do was a no. For instance, I joined the Church Lads Brigade in secret, and I joined the Cubs in secret. But he got to find out, of course, and we were taken out of it.
And so, I mean, that was the idea of the Exclusive Brethren, isn't it? Is that basically
Oh, yes.
you just mix with others who share the same beliefs. So
That's correct.
how did you get to discover other children?
Well, that was at school, but they've got their own schools now.
Well, that's what I thought, because now it's still a sect, which is still a religion, which a particular side that is still carrying on and still down in your hometown of Red Hill and throughout the world. I understand, as you say, they now have their own schools, so you don't have the opportunity to mix with other children. But you were sent to the local school, where I guess your fellow pupils were living life very differently.
Yes, and I disliked school. I left with no qualifications at all. I didn't like exam. I didn't like school really at all.
So you were really quite a rebel in those sort of days. So and it takes a lot of courage to do. Not that we would encourage people to do it, but you actually ran away from home a few times, didn't you?
Yes, I did. The first time I ran away, I was aged 12, and I ran away to see Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth's coronation parade.
Wonderful. And
And
what were your memories of that day? Because it was a fantastic day right in the heart of London.
it was. I mean, we didn't. My brother and I have a twin brother.
Charles
Charles
Gurr.
Gurr. Yes, he's still in the Brethren, and the rest of my
Are you in
family.
touch? Does that when your brother's still in and you're out, does he try to encourage you to come back?
No, well, I've phoned him a couple of times, but they don't want to speak to me really. And I went to my father's house when he was alive, and he wouldn't let me through the front door. So they won't eat with other people. They certainly wouldn't go out to a restaurant. They only eat with brethren.
And as part of the religion, is it an objective to try and convert people or to get people who've run away?
No, they don't. They have. They seem to have a lot of children, and they're all brought up the same way. So the numbers stay as the children grow. And I mean, my father said to me, if you don't change your ways, you'll burn in hell, and you will suffer that in spirit all your days. and when you're dead as well. So that did put the wind up me a bit, but I've learned to live with it, and I've met other people, and as you know, probably, I've done quite well in life.
Oh, you've done phenomenally well in life, and it's such a rich life on that sort of basis. But it is very hard, isn't it, though? I mean, when your parents are bringing you up in a particular way, and you turn around, and every child gets rebellious. I think it's because you were exposed, if you like, to another life where you see children in a school and they talk about playing and going to the cinema and doing this and doing that and all the things that you weren't allowed to do. You would
Correct.
often taste, as they would say, those forbidden fruits, wouldn't you?
That's right. Exactly.
So the first time you had that conversation with your parents, did you remember that?
I went out to visit my father in the hospital when he was dying, and he was, whether he was acting semi-conscious or not, I don't know. But I said, "I'm Michael, your son." He said, "I only know one Michael." So I just sat it there and chatted, and he was in a sort of semi-coma.
And how many years ago was that?
Oh, that's probably 20 years ago.
Right. So you were the age of 60. And had you seen your father in the interim time? Because you say you left home fairly early on.
Yes, it was afterwards. After I left, I went down to see him, and he wouldn't let me in.
Right.
And I've had various jobs, various employments, most of which I loved, but the fire service the most.
Yes, and you have some many proud pictures. So did you? I mean, every child wants to make their parents proud. I think that's sort of built into you in a way, and it must have hurt a lot when you had that sort of rejection, if you like, from your parents. Tell me how you felt.
Well, I knew what I was doing because I knew what happened to other children that run away. And I know that they would have nothing more to do with me, and that proved to be the case.
So it was a conscious decision, but a hard one, because the forbidden fruit, if you like, was too tempting.
Yes, and they would think, things like the magic circle or Satan, so I'm pleased I'm in the magic circle.
Absolutely, and how you've been one of the bedrocks of the magic circle. We'll come on to that as well. But your brother, I mean, he ran away with you to go and see the coronation.
Yes.
What did your parents say to him when he got back?
Well, I got back first home the next day because we stood in the Mall all night. And then we didn't wait for the parade back. He went off to see the 21 gun salute or 41 gun salute, whatever it was. And I found my way back to Victoria Station and went home. So I got home first and I took the flak, and he come home much later. And by that time I told my parents what I'd done and what we'd been up to, but he guessed because we were not going to be allowed to the street party. They had a street party and he would not let us go, so we went ourselves.
And again, it's that sort of exclusion which ultimately left to what must have been a hard decision to actually leave home permanently. And you knew that when you left home permanently, that they would never let you come back.
That's correct. Well, they would let me come back, but only on their terms.
Right.
But I'm not prepared, or was never prepared for that. I mean, I've married a Christian lady who is outside the church, is not in the brethren. One of my nieces has escaped, and she's done very well in life.
And it's very good. And so you say their terms. So if you were to come back at any stage, what would the terms be? I mean, they talk about exclusive, so it would just be now within the brethren. They've made it tighter, so they have their own schools and so on and so forth. What what
Yes, and
what are, what are the specific terms that you'd have to abide by?
well, all their terms, and they've changed over the years since I've been left. But I gather now they've even got their own places of burial. They won't allow their children to go to university. What can I say? I've been separated all these years, and if I'd have stayed in, I would have had to have worked for one of their businesses.
And
All my
what sort of businesses do they have?
Well, my brother Stephen, I believe, he's the owner of quite a large factory, but he's got all brethren working for him. I gather he works all over, he's got work all over the southeast of England.
And so from that point of view, it'd have to be the brother. And are you still in touch with your twin brother?
No, I phoned him a couple of times, but he doesn't want to talk.
So he's been very specifically told he's not allowed to.
Well, he knows that. Yeah.
So you decided then to leave home, a really tough decision. You left home with no qualifications. And so you started to get work, including on the local railway. Tell me about your first job and how that came about.
Well, that was the education officer wanted to interview me at the school. I was called to the headmaster's office and surprised to see him there. And he said, "Now, Michael, what do you think you're going to do when you leave school with no qualifications?" I said, "I've already got a job." And he said, "Oh, what's that?" And I said, "I started as a cleaner on the railways, and within a year I'll be a stoker." And that happened.
Okay, and how did that job happen? You told them, you told your school, you're a very determined young man, you told your school this is what you're going to do. How did that job come about?
Well, I just went and applied. I was one of these train spotters, and I was interviewed by Mr. Harry Taylor, the shed master, and he said, "Yes, of course. I've seen you about the yard once or twice in the locomotive sheds. I know you're keen. All that remained was a medical in Brighton." And I had a pass to go next day, attended the medical and passed, and became a cleaner. But that only lasted for 12 months.
Oh, fantastic. And you say you were a train spotter beforehand, which is rather fun. I mean, tell me about that. What's the most extraordinary train you've seen?
Well, I think it was a Golden Arrow that was run in those days. That was at Waterloo, Victoria Station, and I used to love Waterloo and Clapham Junction.
Oh, fantastic. So, and often I know a few train spotters, and the people always unfairly take the mickey out of train spotters, but anything to do with passion, I think is glorious. And it must be like the wonderful collection. Do you still have your books where you have to check off which trains you've seen?
I've got a whole website on it, Andrew. I don't know whether you've read it or not.
I haven't. But whereabouts? So people who want to find out about it, what is the website?
It's Spooky Mick, www.spookymick.co.uk, because once the name came from actually the Magic Circle.
I was going to say, I remember that night, and you did some magic at the Magic Circle, and people said, "That's Spooky Mick." So
that's right.
And that you took a shine to that.
Yes.
Oh, glorious! So your website is now called spookymick.co.uk. Is that it?
Yes.
Ah, fantastic.
You should get that, or Google Michael Gurr Bedford.
Michael Gurr Bedford, and you'll find out about all the glorious trains that you have spotted, and other people can pick up that passion which I think is, it becomes a passion, doesn't it? Is there one train you've yet to spot?
Quite a few trains, but only on the southern region. But as I worked as a stoker by then, I had stopped that, and it's stoking. It was normally from Red Hill to Reading or Red Hill to Tunbridge, and we had 7 mile pull-up Dorking Bank, which was very hard work.
Right. And what did a stoker have to do? These were the days when you had the steam train. Talk to us about what your day would involve.
Well, coming on duty, check that everything was all right. The water tank was full. The fire was well lit, and there was water in the gauge glass. Check the lamps, and that we had 12 detonators and 2 red flags in case we came off the rails or some accident happened. And then we were ready to go out. The signalman and the foreman told us the time to go down to the signal, which we did, coupled up with a train, and away we went.
And it's quite glorious. And I have to say, so it's my favourite times have been on trains. There are some magnificent journeys, not just in this country. And I've been up to Scotland on the overnight sleeper. I think is it the Caledonian Sleeper, I think they call it. And had some wonderful memories there. But also, I went to Russia one time. I flew to Moscow, and I was supposed to, just before the Sochi Olympics, I was supposed to fly to a place called Krasnodar. But the weather was so bad, it was snowing, it was going to be a 45-minute flight. They wouldn't let the planes take off. So instead, I had the most extraordinary but glorious train journey, which took about 6 hours getting from Moscow to Sochi, and I absolutely adored it. It was like being in a time warp. And trains are a magnificent way of travel, aren't they?
Hello, you're back.
Ah, yes, I was just saying a glorious, glorious time. So that's wonderful. So what has been your favourite train journey that you yourself have taken?
So what's the longest train journey I've taken?
Yes, what's been your favourite train journey? I was just talking about my wonderful time in Russia, and I've also had wonderful times in Canada, in the Rockies, driving through those on a train as well. What about yourself? What's been your favourite train journey?
Well, I think my favourite train journey was the 5:25 out of London Bridge fast to Red Hill. And that was a commuter train, and all the men were running along with their bowler hats and rolled umbrellas in those days, all city men, and jumping on the train. The starter, the advanced starter signals raised, the whistles blew, and we were off. And my driver was Stan Rapley, a great fellow, and we did well. And when we were relieved at Red Hill, and the train went on to Reading.
Oh, fantastic. Are you still in touch with Stan?
No, he's long since gone. All the old drivers have gone now. And I don't think there's any left that were of my time.
Really? I find that it's all. I'll tell you what, you'll be surprised, Mick, the number of people around the world who watch the Andrew Eborn show. There will be somebody who'll be watching. They'll say, I remember that Mick Gurr. And we'll reunite you. We'll have a glorious moment. I should say now, well, on the line, I've got such and such a driver, but that won't happen today, but it's going to be glorious. But you then moved from Red Hill, where you enjoyed that commute, you enjoyed working on the railways as a stoker. You then moved all the way to Bedford. Why did you make that move?
Well, the thing was, I wanted to get out of the way of the brethren, and I put a map of England out. I turned around 3 times, and then this is true. Put up, and it came up Bedford. Now you've got to remember that before that I was often sleeping rough, I had nowhere to go. Sometimes I slept in a goods wagon, and sometimes I slept in the waiting room of Red Hill, and sometimes I slept on the footplate of the engines, because at least it was warm and dry.
So it is quite extraordinary, because people, as they having left so young, and as a stoker, I imagine the wage wasn't enough necessarily to do rent anywhere. So I can understand that, yes, you would be sleeping rough. How much were you paid as a stoker? Do you remember?
I can't remember, but it was about £6 a week.
£6 a week, and in those
Something
days,
like that.
and that obviously was not really enough to get by on, was it?
Well, I did just get by, but I never did any other job while I was on the railways. That came later.
Well, when you moved to Bedford, you then started to get involved with hospitals, and tell me about that transition, because it's quite a, rather than carrying on the railways, it's quite a change of career. Tell me what made you make the change.
Well, I had worked at the Royal Earlswood Hospital, and I met a friend there only a couple of years ago that I worked with. We had the Boseline sisters were in there, and she took me over to the ladies' side one day, and the Boseline girls, Catherine and Narissa, were there. They were related to the Queen Mother, I believe.
Oh, absolutely. Well, fantastic. So you could, if you played your cards right, you could have been part of the royal family, Mick. Glorious. And if anybody can play their cards right, it's got to be a magician, doesn't it?
It's got to be.
So you started working in the hospitals, and you had an extraordinary time where you were looking after, at one period, 70 patients all by yourself. Tell me about that.
Well, that was on nights. That was Hazel's Hall in Bedfordshire, out in the sticks, a place, tiny village called Everton. And on nights, we were on our own. I had had no formal training for this, but I had worked at the Royal Earlswood, so I knew the drill pretty well. It was good, really, because I could live in there, and in the winter, I think it was 63, we were snowed in for about 3 days.
But quite extraordinary. I mean, to look after 70 patients.
Yes.
And people talk about now about the fantastic NHS and the great work that they do. But looking after 70 patients, how on earth did you cope?
Well, I had to do a round every hour and had a stamp clock to go to every point in the hospital. I did have one upset when I was in the old theatres there, and there was a dickens of a row going on upstairs and fighting. So I ran up there, separated the two that were fighting. One had tried to get in bed with the other. I got the perpetrator, and I took him downstairs and made him sleep in my office. Gave him a blanket, and he was there for the night. And I returned him just before the chief male nurse come back on duty. I didn't even bother to report it.
Quite extraordinary. Who was this chap trying to get in bed with?
Well, they were both mentally disturbed because they were there. That's why they were there.
But we understand mental illness much better now, and I think so. You're working effectively in an institution,
Yes.
but looking after 70 patients in a mental institution. I find it extraordinary you were able to cope.
Well, I think they were all pretty high grade. That's what they call them. In those days, I mean, it's not politically correct now. It was feeble-minded, subnormal, and severely subnormal. We only had about 2 severely subnormal. Most of them were just either feeble-minded or subnormal.
Well, and as you say, I've always hated labels, and people have got a much better understanding of mental illness and the
Oh, yes,
challenges
yes.
and the challenges that it has now. And as you know, I'm a big advocate myself about talking about mental issues and mental health. But care, nevertheless, at whatever the label might be, care for 70 people entrusted to one person, I still find extraordinary. You know, so you managed to do your rounds every night, and you also within the hospital environment, you were involved with every aspect. You did everything from the operating theatres to the mortuary to various other things. And what was your role with
Yes.
doing all of that?
Well, that was in another hospital.
Of course,
I
yeah.
just mentioned the theatres. That was the old theatre of the Pym family, who owned Hazel Hall. Lord Pym was MP at one time, I think. Moving on to the other hospitals, when I moved to Bedford, I worked at Bedford General Hospital as a porter, and I went to the theatres to fetch and carry the patients back to their rooms. They were usually half conscious and coming round those days. And the Sister Huggins said to me, "Michael, would you like to join us in the theatres?" And I said, "Yes, I'd love to." I was, after about 12 months, a gentleman left there that was doing a higher job than me, and I was asked, would I like to take his place? His name was George Roberts. I said, yes, I'd love to. So I'd gone two courses at Hillingdon Hospital to do this work, and that's the only exam I ever passed. That didn't mean much at all. So I worked for the anaesthetist. I laid up his trolleys. I helped him intubate patients, and of course went in with him and was with him all the time. Changed the gas bottles if necessary. Did all the things, passing him the right equipment at the right time. So I got to watch all the operations.
That's very good. And so theatre, as they say, was in your blood, albeit it was from the medical point of view as well. And during this time, you met Josephine. What was the first time, who subsequently became your wife in 1965? Tell me the first time you set eyes on Josephine.
In the dry cleaners. I was working as a private nurse then, looking after an old gentleman who had dementia. And I went there for my clothes to be cleaned. And we decided on a date. I got one girl and my friend Pete got another girl, and we decided to swap over. And I started going out with Josie. She sat downstairs now. We're still married, I think 55 years now.
Oh, absolutely. You were married in April 1965. So absolutely,
Yeah.
55 years, wedding anniversary. Did you celebrate in style?
No, we didn't. But we did celebrate in style. I think it was on my 70th birthday. Fergus Ancorn come up for it, and David Hatch, and we had a lot of people there. And I don't know if you know or not, my wife Josie is a singer.
Ah, yes, I do know, because I've heard her sing, because during lockdown, and actually lockdown on the 23rd of March, obviously, all the way up until fairly recently. So you had your wedding anniversary, your 55th wedding anniversary during lockdown. And I know that when you were clapping for the NHS on those Thursday nights, Josie would come out and sing in the streets.
Yes, you've done your research well.
Ah, that's my job, Mick. It's got to be good. It's always fun. So we should absolutely get to meet Josie, which is fantastic. And talking about productions, you have three wonderful productions. You have Your Children. I've been in touch with at least two of them because they helped set up this glorious Zoom interview for you, which is good. Tell me about Your Children.
Well, Ruth, the eldest daughter, is just out of camera shot now, and she wishes to stay outside. She's a very quiet girl, a very pretty girl, and she's aged about 50-ish.
Aged about 27, did you say?
Aged about 50. She probably won't like me saying
He
that.
won't like you telling her age, but she's very helpful, yes. And what about the other two?
Well, one is a boy, the other one, Jason, he lives in Bedford, and the other one is Lydia, who is a probation officer.
And who does she work for?
The probation service. She deals with the worst offenders going. I
appreciate a probation officer works for the probation service. Whereabouts specifically is she?
Well, she's in Hertfordshire now, I think.
Okay. And you say she works with the worst people. What sort of people is she working with?
Sex offenders. And well, she's not allowed to tell us anything, but I mean, I know certain things. And it's a very difficult job.
What sort of things do you know without naming names, Mick?
Well, she has to ask some very pertinent questions about what they do and what they've been up to, and recommends to the judge what her report, and that's how it goes on.
So we have one daughter working for the probation service, and what do your other two do?
My son is a filmmaker like yourself.
Only he's good at it.
I think he is. I think he is. I was got a film or two of his.
Okay. What sort of films has he done?
Well, it's mostly about people, and he goes to London and films there, and does guided tours of London.
Oh, right.
And films. Yes.
Okay. And what's his? He's Jason. He goes under the name of Jason Gurr as well, does he?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Very good. And Ruth?
Ruth, she's a lovely girl. A great
wonderful. She's right within earshot. In fact, probably within clipping shot. So you've got to say nice things.
I'd rather you didn't.
So what does Ruth do? What's her line of business?
Well, she's worked abroad a lot, mainly in America, I believe, in Thailand, and she works in a supermarket.
Oh, fantastic! And what was she doing abroad then?
Teaching English to foreign students. Yes.
Actually, it's a great job. It's a great way of traveling and getting. I imagine that the travel must have been in your blood as well, and working, as you say, in the various services, because you worked on the railway, you worked in the hospital. You then had a glorious period. I think some of your proudest moments when you worked for the fire service. Tell me a bit about that.
Well, yes, I was a retained fireman first whilst I was at the hospital. That means they called us in when we were off duty if we were required. Then I applied to be a professional fireman and got in. I was posted first to Dunstable because they always like you to serve on another station first. I served at Dunstable for about 18 months and then was transferred back to Kempston in Bedfordshire. And I enjoyed that because I went to some pretty awful fires and road accidents. I do believe my knowledge of first aid and that sort of thing came in handy as I'd been working in the hospital.
And I think that's always very helpful, building on that sort of expertise. And some of the most glorious posts, because you're very good with social media. I see your posts on Facebook, and you put up a wonderful picture of you in front of your fire engine, looking very dapper and very, very proud.
Yes, that was my retirement day.
In 1993, that was your retirement,
yes,
is that right?
Yes,
And
That's
you should
correct.
test me. You should test me on the Mick Gurr life. I'm doing quite well so far. But in 1993, Mick, it gave you the opportunity to extend your passion for magic, because your first magician you saw during the Festival of Britain when you were a wee nipper. Tell me about that day.
Yes, that was our late Pearly King. I didn't know it till after he'd passed away.
Larry
Can't remember.
Barnes, was it?
Yes, that's it.
There you
Oh,
go. Larry Barnes, the Pearly King. So he was your first magician.
first time I saw magic. I slipped into the tent without my father knowing, and he thought I was lost, you see, but I wasn't. And he came along and did the pennies in the bucket. And so he
Miser's
took
dream, the miser's dream.
Miser's dream, yes. That's right.
And so how old would you have been at that age?
Oh, that was 1951.
So you were 11?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So, and that was your first memory of Larry Barnes, who was a glorious character. For those of you who have not yet seen, look out Larry Barnes. He did a fantastic Pearly King act. He always used to, I remember him smoking a pipe, and he was one of those sort of, a real character within the magic circle, wasn't he?
He certainly was, yes.
And he did escapology and things like that as well. So a real character. And so that was at the Festival of Britain. You saw him producing coins out of nowhere. And that then inspired you a few years later to get involved with magic. When did you learn your first magic trick then?
Well, I got one, and I'd been attending the magic circle for, I suppose, 12 months, and then I had to take my exam. And I did something that nobody knew how it was done. I think it was Michael Vincent, Faye Presto, and one other on the judges. And I asked a gentleman to write down his mother's maiden name, which he did. And without me seeing it, I put it up on the board slowly, one by one, thinking it was an act. And then I said, "What is your mother's maiden name?" And I believe he said Russell, and I turned it round, and it was Russell. And that is how I believe I passed.
Fantastic. And so that was on the 20th of May, 2002.
Yes.
I'm going for the car, you see, Mick. This is all little points in your life. It's got to be brilliant.
Yeah.
I can tell because magic means a lot to you, and the community of the magic circle in particular, because you went on to then be involved with the running of the magic circle, particularly on Monday nights. Tell me how that came about.
Well, somebody left the hosting job, and I took it over. And I was meet and greet at the door. And if they were for taking their exam, I reassured them we ought to be behind them and rooting for them, and tried to put them at ease. I remember showing David Hatch around, and of course he's a well-known member now in the magic circle. I remember showing a gentleman who was a cricket umpire, and I had a photograph taken with him. It was a lovely job to meet people.
And the great thing about magic, it is a passport to travel around the world. And you yourself, you've performed in a number of countries, including Switzerland and Japan. Tell me about what you do, apart from reading people's minds and being able to tell their mother's maiden name. What do you do in your act?
Well, I don't do it anymore because I'm nearly 80 and have no car. I gave up driving because I felt it wasn't right for me to be on the road. But I've still got most of my equipment, including them. I used to offer them a card They took it. It was a force, and I spread them across the table, and hand automatically went along and stopped at the right card. That little card. Good Lord, he said. Have you seen that one?
Oh, it sounds incredible. So, absolutely, I think that is wonderful when you can control people with your mind and with your words and everything else. And I think it's very, very powerful on that sort of basis. But as you say, it's a passport for many, many places. But you've also did a bit of goat herding on your CV.
I did.
How did that come about?
That was when I was in Switzerland, and I did a show twice a week, and a little bit of help from her. They paid me well, and one day I saw an elderly lady, a local, and she said, please, have you anybody that might help me with my goat herding to the William Tell show? And I was called out, and Dora, the hotel owner, said, could you help this lady with her goats twice a week? And I said, yes, I'd love to. So it started, and it continued for about 7 years. When I wasn't over, I didn't stay in Switzerland 7 years, but I went over for that season of goat herding that she did. My daughter Ruth went over and met her last year or the year before, and she's still alive, and she doesn't do the goats anymore, but I enjoyed that. It was a wonderful job. We took the goats round to the William Tell play, up through the forest and over the mountain, and then down into the play. The Swiss, as you know, are brilliant timekeepers.
Oh, they invented time and cuckoo clocks and the land of the cheese. I love Switzerland.
Yes. I went to many places while I was there, including the top of the Jungfrau, you know.
Oh yeah, I know, it's wonderful. I particularly love Switzerland. I used to be the chair of the Montreux Comedy Festival, which meant that I went twice to the fantastic place, 3 times actually, to Montreux, where they had not just the jazz, but also we set up this international comedy festival. And the Swiss and the food and the architecture and the culture and the countryside, it is divine, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
No, we
Yes.
absolutely love that. Well, and you've always had a few adventures in your travels, but there was one particular time when you were held up at gunpoint. Tell me about that.
That was in Israel. We wanted to go to a place called Hebron. I found a friend. I went to Israel. I wanted to see all the places mentioned in the Bible, but this chap asked me, would I go with him to Hebron? I said yes. We travelled there. It didn't take long. We had a taxi there, and it was nice, really. But we were walking along the road, and then up through a path to see this big temple. I believe it was a Buddhist temple, and 2 officers in uniform stepped out and held us up. We didn't know what was going on, and we had to step over barbed wire, and they pointed their rifles up, and we both put our hands up. What are you doing? We told him we were on our way to see this building, and he said, no, there's going to be trouble today. You must come with us. There's going to be trouble because it was an anniversary of somebody going in there and shooting people. He organised a military bus for us so we could get out safely. And I got into the bus, there were soldiers on board, and they said, keep down, because we might get bricks thrown at us and all sorts. Keep out of the sight. And I kept down on the floor, and so did my friend. And sure enough, we had a few things thrown at us. But I looked up, and there was a very beautiful Jewish woman, young lady, complete with a rifle. So they got us out of Hebron okay and put us on a bus back to where we were staying.
But quite extraordinary. And talk about being in either the right place or the wrong place at the right or wrong time, depending on what it was. You were also present in Berlin when the wall came down. What took you to Berlin?
Yes, that is quite right. I've still got a piece of that wall as well.
Oh, have you?
Yes. I haven't got it close to hand. But,
oh, that's okay. We'll get it next time we get you on the show. But tell me, what were you doing in Berlin on that particular occasion?
Well, I wanted to go and see if I could get to East Berlin, and at that time when the wall was coming down, there was a checkpoint Charlie. You may remember.
I've been to Checkpoint Charlie. I've stayed in Berlin, so I'm very familiar with that. And lots of people go past that. It is quite extraordinary. Parts of the wall, apart from the bit that you've nicked, parts of the wall is still up for people to see, so they can remember. Yes. I remember Checkpoint Charlie very well. So what were you doing by Checkpoint Charlie?
Well, there was another place to cross, but you had to come back through Checkpoint Charlie. And they were looking up at a mirror. I think they had a camera outside, or some description, to see if I had anything in the pockets that I shouldn't have. And I got let through, and that was the end of that. I wanted to go to Berlin because I actually my best friend, he lives in Germany, and he's adopted me into his family. His brother Robert Holtz. I expect you've heard about him.
Oh yes, I've heard about Robert Holtz, and I've seen many glorious pictures of you with a pint in hand, yes, sitting up with the Holtzes on those mountains. It looks superb. It's got to be good. So you were there on the dime of the Berlin Wall. Do you remember the artist who was singing on the Berlin Wall for both the East German and West Germans at the time?
I can't remember that.
It was my very good friend, otherwise known as the Hoff, David Hasselhoff, who is a huge star, not just for doing Kit and Knight Rider and on all sorts of talent shows, but also as a rock artist. And as a rock artist, particularly in Germany, they adore the Hoff. And he sang on the wall.
Did he really?
Yeah, absolutely. Was you were busy nicking a bit, he was singing. It's gotta be good. Now, the other thing that you did, I mean, you've done everything in your life. You also won a camel race. Tell me how that came about.
Yes. Have you seen the picture of it on my website?
Oh, everything. I love your website. It's all very good. Fantastic. So tell me how that came about.
Well, my colleagues in the fire service, we went out with a steam fire engine, and I forget where the town was exactly, but it was a big show, and we went there and displayed our steamer with horses, and they said, we've put you in for it, Mick. I said, what? Put me in for what? They said, the camel race. So if you've seen the photograph, there's my brass helmet on, my old helmet, and I won the camel race. So, mind you, there were only 3 camels in it, so I had a place somewhere.
3 camels hump free, that's what they say. But don't tell them that. Never let the truth stand in the way of a good story. You won. It doesn't matter how many people were in the race. The fact is you won, Mick, which is superb. And you've won many accolades in your life. You've got exemplary service from the fire service. You got Jack Delvin recognizing you, sending wonderful letters, all sorts of other accolades. You were also made a free man of the City of London, which entitled you to drive your sheep over London Bridge. And I think you took full advantage of that, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I had to pay to do that, but that was for charity. And I did drive sheep a lot across London Bridge, and I've got a photograph of that somewhere.
Oh, you have. 29th of September 2011. The photographic evidence, I say, it looks superb, but it's a wonderful privilege, isn't it? The freedom of the city, and it's a great ceremony. How did that come about? How did you get your freedom of the city?
2 members of the Magic Circle were freemen, and they asked me if I would like to be a freeman, and I said yes, I'd like that very much. And I went along, and the clerk of the court installed me, and I've got pictures of that downstairs, and the audience, some friends of mine came up and filled the room up, and I enjoyed it. And I went down a few times after to meet the clerk of the court, and signed documents for him several times. I enjoyed that outing as well, because he always gave us tea, and that was lovely.
Oh, fantastic. And you were also awarded, just slightly beforehand, the Golden Key in Switzerland for the town of Interlaken.
Yes, it's up on my shelf up behind me somewhere.
No, fantastic. And so how did that come about?
Well, because I was loyal to the town. The owner of the hotel, Dora Geringer, recommended to the local mayor that I be awarded this Golden Key of Interlaken. So I didn't know till today that it was happening in the evening. She said, Mick, don't go out tonight. And then I was suddenly called downstairs, and there was all the guests there, and the local, I'm not sure if they call him a mayor or not, but the local bigwig gave a little speech and called me up and presented me with the Golden Key. That was for the loyalty to the town of Interlaken.
Fantastic. Well, not that loyal, because obviously you got the freedom of the City of London, so you've got to pick. You can work out. And so what does that entitle you, your Golden Key? Can you drive appropriate goats or something? What can you do with your Golden Key?
No, I can't do anything with it. I've just got a certificate saying it might be on my wall up here. Yes, it is.
There you go. I can see it just over your right shoulder, so I can read it from here with my eagle eyes. So it's all
Can you
nice.
really?
I absolutely. It tells, and it also, and this is what the great thing about it is, I know you have very long friendships throughout this sort of glorious life. Your family holds, we talked about them beforehand, but they've been good friends for 45 years, haven't they?
Yes, yes.
And when did you first meet them?
Well, he came over as a student, and I had a colleague over the other side of the house we still live in, and he had a phone call, and he couldn't put him up. So I said to Josie, can we put a German student up for a few weeks? And she said, yes, of course. And his name was Robert Holtz, and he was studying English. So I took him everywhere I could, including visits to London, and he enjoyed himself. There's pictures of that somewhere. And then I used to go over and visit him, and I had some wonderful times with him. And lately he adopted me as one of his family, because I've got no family on my side, you see. So I could put Michael James Holtz Gurr.
HG, Horse.Andrew sounds, it's got a nice ring about it. I love that. So friends for 45 years, and you've been adopted into that family. The other great friendship that you had came with Fergus Ancorn, who's a legend in Magic Circle terms.
Oh yes,
As we
he came.
celebrate the 75th anniversary of the end of war, and I had the great pleasure of interviewing Fergus, as you probably remember, a
Yes,
number
I
of
did.
years ago, and spoke about his extraordinary life. Tell me how that friendship started.
Well, I did his mother's maiden name because I thought, oh, he's a nice gentleman. And I asked somebody, how old's that Fergus Ancorn? So I don't know if you know how I do it. I went and look up the births, marriages, and deaths. You see, so I found out all about Fergus and went over to ask him if I could show him a trick. And of course, being Fergus, he was always very polite. And he said, yes, of course, we'd love to see it. And I said, I want you to write down your mother's maiden name and turn it over. Well, he put it inside his diary while my back was turned. And I got it, you see, and he couldn't believe it. He said, oh, how on earth did you do that? And I did it to a few more people around the magic circle before I took my exam. And I do believe that's the only reason I passed my exam, because I asked first David Tompkins, and he said, no, I'm assessing you. And Michael Vincent was there, and Faye Presto. So I asked the chap behind him, because I had his as well, just in case. I had a whole list. And I had them just under my hand, which I rested on the table. I slipped it down and looked at, yes, got it. I don't know whether you were at that exam, were you?
Well, that's spooky, Mick, as they would say. I think I would have remembered that. That was absolutely sensational. And you climbed through the ranks as well, didn't you? Because not just on that occasion performing magics there, but having served as the club night host and a very affable, welcoming host as well, you were subsequently promoted to associate of the inner magic circle.
That's correct, yes.
How did that make you feel?
Well, pretty good, really. I'd done it without an examination. I enjoy people who everybody that comes to tea to our house, I have to show them a little trick, you see. So I say, well, I haven't got much left. It'll have to be a card trick. Oh, no, we love cards. And so I do a couple of tricks with them. Usually one with a hand, or sometimes I say, pick a card, which is a force, and it's a pack of magic circle cards. And I tell them the name of the card they picked. And they said, how did you do that? And I said, look, if I open these pack of cards, it tells me on there what card you've got, the Eight of Hearts. And that amazed them.
So the wonderful sort of bluff, really, which is all very good. It's all done by magic, really. That's the real secret. It's all done by magic and wonderful influence. But that friendships, and that's the great thing about the magic circle. It does create wonderful lifelong friendship. So you started with Fergus, you predicted his mother's maiden name, or you read his mind, and you then became very firm friends, because often on a Monday night you would see the both of you together at the bars sharing stories, but also you mixed socially afterwards as well, didn't you?
Yes, very much so. He used to come up and stay with us. and he always enjoyed that. And he came up to my 70th birthday party, and he was doing magic tricks around the tables. I had a big church hall there. Thoroughly enjoyed it. 2 dogs were present in there.
And he was very good because he used to have a trick. He used to have a trick with dogs as well. He used to get his own dog involved with mind reading, and it was very clever.
Yeah.
And his dog would do all sorts of clever tricks.
Yeah.
But Fergus, in a way, because of the age difference, and
Yes.
he could have been effectively your father's age, couldn't he? On that sort of basis. So he was effectively, I mean, 20 plus years older than you. So he could have been your father. Do you think he was the missing father in your life?
Well, we got on so well together, you know, it was surprising. When he first arrived on Bedford Station, we went abroad to Switzerland together, we went to Germany together, and they all enjoyed his company very much indeed. He said, I always vowed I would never go to Germany because, you know, they started the war. And he was welcomed very much. And they held a do almost every night for us. That's Brother Holtz and his family. And oh yes, that was wonderful. And I was at his memorial service as well.
So quite a great. You obviously miss him. So that was the father figure in your life, if you like. I mean, you got to know him for the last 15 or so years of his life, and when you joined, and it had some glorious memories. What would be your favourite memory of your time with Fergus?
Well, him coming to our house, and every time he was asked to show a guest of ours a bit of magic, he would. He'd do all sorts of things. But I do remember his dog act well. That was the most amazing thing about him, that he could train a dog so well.
And what sort of tricks would he do with the dog?
Well, I remember him, the dog sat in one corner, and he wrote on the blackboard hat, and the dog used to go and get his hat. He wrote on the board umbrella, and the dog used to go and get the umbrella and bring it back. Have you seen that?
Fantastic, absolutely, and it is an absolute miracle, and it's a joy, because what I love, and it's wonderful to see also Fergus on Britain's Got Talent on the final, when he was with Richard Jones, who first magician ever to win Britain's Got Talent, and it was a joy to see that, and I had the real privilege of going along to the Royal Variety performance as well. I was invited by a very good friend of mine, Ian Freeman, who a regular watcher of this show, but he's also on the Royal Variety committee. He's the treasurer for them, and they do some fantastic work. So I went along to see the Royal Variety performance, and Richard was such a great ambassador for magic, and seeing Fergus on that stage, it must have made you feel really proud as well, didn't it?
It was. I was invited there as his guest, and it was the final. And of course, I think that really Fergus helped him win that by coming on, by when he rolled that Union flag up, and Fergus was stood there with a soldier, and that was wonderful.
I think there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And if ever you're looking for a recipe for a winning act, if you can tug at the heartstrings with that wonderful backstory, that's got to be good, doesn't it?
It was. It was one of the best experiences of my life.
Fantastic. No, an absolute joy. Well, Mick, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up, as always. And the one final question, which I always ask all my guests, is how would you, Mick Gurr, like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered by my experiences through life. I think that's a fair answer. I've been very fortunate in life, and I've had many happy years in doing things, unusual things. I mean, I went to Nagasaki in Japan and entertained them. That was wonderful. Everybody bowed to me, and I finished my show, and they all bowed, and one lay flat on the floor, which is usually reserved for the emperor.
Wow. And when was that, Mick? When did that happen in Nagasaki?
I can't remember the exact date, but it was a few years back.
Right. Because obviously with the the celebrations of the end of war, we're also remembering the tragedies as well. And
Yes.
and it's good. And magic is a great unifier. Magic is the great language, if you like, the international language. And so having those wonderful memories, and as you say, to be remembered in that way with a really rich and varied life, it certainly has been, I think, extraordinary is the word that I would use.
Thank you.
Mick, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you, Andrew.
Take care. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, there we go. That was the fantastic Mick Gurr. And behind the scenes, he had his wonderful daughter who helped set this up. Ruth, how are you, Ruth?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Well done. What an extraordinary life. How much of that did you know already?
Most of it, but because he's had such a long and varied and interesting life, there's always things that you just sort of forget, and it was great to listen to all of it again.
It was a little snippet. Well, absolute delight. Thank you so much for helping to set that up. I wish you all and your family well over the next few days. I know it's an interesting time.
Yes.
But your father's a fascinating guy and a fascinating life for you as well. Do stay in touch.
Thanks very much, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Thanks a lot, Ruth. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
So there you have it, to Mick Gurr, my very special guest, and what a rich and fabulous life. Quite extraordinary. Extraordinary is the word I don't use that often. I know the word unprecedented has been used more unprecedented times recently, but it was quite extraordinary. And that's the great unifier about magic. We have some extraordinary characters within the magic world, some of whom, the most exciting of whom, have already been on the Andrew Eborn Show, and many, many more to come. If you'd like to be on the show, write to me at guests@octopustv.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Octopus TV on all the usual channels. Follow me at Andrew Eborn at Octopus TV. But until then, thank you very much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.